from that moment that kind of like steered my heart towards congregational worship. I was already a worship leader at the time, but like actually kind of like absorbing that reality, like my big desire is to help other people connect with God in a divine way.
Hey, welcome into this episode of the Worship Band Builder podcast, where we're working with you to lay the foundation for skillful worship. Now, this is a new season of podcast. As you know, if you've been watching recently, they're long-form conversations with my friends and people who I just find interesting, who I've met in life. And this next guest is Shawn Starbuck. I actually met him tuning his piano. He works at a church in Murfreesboro. I'll give him a quick rundown. In this first episode, we're going to talk about his life and how he got where he is right now. And in part 2, we're going to talk about his church and sort of ministry and how he's building his ministry very successfully there. But Shawn Starbuck is a CCM artist and a vocalist. You can find him on Spotify and different links. There will be in the description. He's a songwriter. He's a worship leader. He's an ordained pastor. His first full-length album was released in 2010. It was called Not Ashamed. He co-wrote the Billboard charting Christmas single, You Are the Reason, in 2010. So he was doing a lot there in 2010. And he's currently the worship director at Christian Life Church in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. That's here in Middle Tennessee. His website is shawnstarbuck.com, and you will find that link in the description. And Shawn has a very interesting story. He has, we're going to weave through it in this episode. And I want you to get to know Shawn in this episode a little more. And then in part 2, we are going to dive into how he's created a very vibrant, successful worship ministry, rotating a lot of people in a mid-level sized church, something that we all aspire to do, especially if we're in smaller churches. We'll look to guys like Shawn and go, how did you do this? How are you making it work? And how are you keeping it fresh? How are you getting your volunteers to be inspired? One thing I do know about Shawn's church, he has a very good sense of relationship, and we're going to hear a lot about that in this episode. Be sure to grab that like button and subscribe to the channel if you like the episode. Let's get into it. Well, welcome in to the podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to start this podcast out. It's going to be a little bit about you, about your origin story, your playing, your journey into becoming a worship leader, and sort of your background. And then we're going to get into about pastoring a team and sort of talk about some of those things that you do, because I know you can speak right to that, and that's really important. Sure. I know when I first was hired as a worship leader, back in the day, they would start calling me pastor, and they probably call you pastor, and that's fine.
It's still getting used to that, but yeah.
It was strange because I was trained secularly through a music degree, and then I go to my church and they start calling me Pastor Eric, and I'm like, whoa, back up now. I'm not equipped for this. And so it was always a little bit strange. And that's going to happen to any worship leader that comes in. Some churches are going to expect that role. It doesn't matter if they call you pastor or not. We are going to be pastoring those people. We absolutely, by stepping into that role, become sort of like a role model and a pastor model. So we're going to dive into your experience with pastoring, growing a team, all of that towards the middle to the end. So
sounds good.
It doesn't matter, like necessarily like where you were born, but I think you're from Florida, right?
I came here from Florida. I was actually a military brat. So Dad was first sergeant in the Army. So born in Texas, we moved to Germany, lived there for a while, then ended up in California for the majority of my teenager years. And then Florida is where I ended up going out and helping plant a church out there. But yeah. And then after Florida, God called us up here. So I'm interested to know what instruments you play and how did it start? What was the beginning? It's funny. You see those Polaroid pictures of back from the 80s. Some of those things, and you see me on a piano or a little guitar. And so I think for all of my life, music has just been part of it. My family is very musical. When we got together for family reunions, the big thing we always did at Grandma's church was the whole family would put on a concert, if you will, different hymns and songs and all that kind of stuff. So for my whole life, I've just been a part of music. But where I really got serious, my Uncle Dennis, he played saxophone. And this is when I was just really young. I always thought that was just a cool instrument. That's back when Kenny G and all those people were doing that. And so when I really got interested in music, my first instrument was saxophone. So I started playing that about fourth grade. I did that for a few years. But what I really wanted was to play drums. I always just loved groove and just the feel and the energy that came from a kick and a snare. I mean, I could still to this day, you just give a kick drum and a snare drum and it's right in the pocket and I could just stay there forever. I love that rhythm. So about 7th grade, we sold that saxophone. I got a drum kit and played drums for many, many years. Actually, ironically, where I lead from the most is acoustic guitar, but that was the very last instrument that I learned. I didn't actually pick up the acoustic guitar until college when I was doing my associate's degree in music. So yeah, it was saxophone and drums and then piano, of course. Everybody just kind of like picks up piano and plays that throughout their life.
7. So you're around 7. You're playing the drums, or did you say
7th grade?
7th grade. That's the best time to play the drums, right?
Oh my gosh!
So
I still remember playing Aladdin in junior high band. It's
okay.
Like, it's like all those fun Disney movies that were coming out.
So you played the kit, and then did you play the little marching band, all the drum stuff?
Yeah, high school I did marching band. I still remember one particular march we did down in the middle of the city and carrying that big bass drum and hitting it, and I didn't know how to do it right. So I looked down and there's blood all over the head because I had been hitting it for so long and stuff. And
that's really hardcore, man. That's bleeding out on the drums.
Yep.
When's the first time you played like in a rock band, or did you? Because it sounds like you played a lot through school band. Did you ever play in like a band?
Yeah, funny story. So I don't know if this is interesting or not.
We want to hear a funny story. Yeah,
funny story. Interesting thing is that I actually, I'm a white guy, but I ended up having a lot of black friends. I went to Seaside High, and I was one of the very few white guys, and all my friends were either they were mixed or black guys, or they were Hispanic guys, and just so I hung out with a lot. So actually, hip hop. Yo MTV Raps, all that kind of stuff was my whole high school. And so somewhere in the middle of high school, my dad and I built a shed in our backyard, and I turned that into a studio, and I actually produced beats for people, and they'd come over and record their rap songs, and we would free flow, we would do all that kind of stuff. And that was kind of like remember I was talking about how I just love a kick and I just love groove. I could just sit in that pocket all day long and just feel this is something really fun to be a part of.
So you're making beats for rappers?
Making beats for rappers.
You're a rapper beat.
And I tried my very first band. It was actually called, if you want to call it a band, it was a rap group called Voices of Paradise. We were VOP. And so it was a full long album, and actually went around California performing Christian rap, and we would tour around with they were called Action House at the time, and we would go into a community, where people didn't necessarily know Jesus, set up a stage, do some like little drama things, meet with the people, and then we would perform and share the gospel and all that kind of stuff. That was probably around 17, 18.
So is Voices of Paradise? Are they out there on Spotify? Can we hear them?
I sure hope not. I think I have buried that very deep down. It was all on cassette.
Okay.
So there was cassette and some CDs, very select CDs.
I got to hear that. I mean, I'm imagining. I mean, back in when was this year? Like in the 90s.
Like 90s, yeah.
Because we're the same age, right?
Yeah.
So 90s. Electronic music was different.
Sampling was on the rise. It was like the whole you had Naughty by Nature and those guys just making a sample. It wasn't very much where you were in and out or different fills and stuff. It was just that same consistent beat going on and on and on, and then the way you made it interesting was through your voice. So
what were you recording beats on? Like a 8-track recorder, like a tape deck?
So I mean, Pro Tools existed by then.
Okay,
so, yeah, Pro Tools
very early.
It was still like Pro Tools 1 or whatever it was.
Pro Tools LE or something. I remember the first Pro Tools I got was like Pro Tools LE. It was like this.
I think that was the beginning of it. And then ADATs, it worked in connection.
Yeah. So you had the ADATs?
I had ADATs and then that, and then the Roland sampler. I can't remember what it was back then. And you could sample that in, and people were creating beats, and you would borrow those, and you could put it together just like you can now. So
that's cool. Yeah, I had Pro Tools. I had ADATs. I started on a 4-track, a Tascam.
I remember.
Porta 2. Actually, I have 2 of them in my closet.
With the cassette 4-track.
Yeah, a little
where you
cassette
could both
4-track.
sides. Yeah.
We had a 4-track. I think we had an 8-track. But most of my early memories was 7th, 8th grade. I was on a 4-track.
Yeah.
9th grade 4-track.
Have you ever accidentally like grabbed one of those tapes and put it in a regular, and then hear like sounds like
it's backwards or something? Yeah. Or if you flip it over, it's backwards. Yeah. So that's amazing. I never would have pegged you as a rapper.
Yeah.
But you just did the drum beats. Were you actually rapping?
I did rap. Yeah. Voices of Paradise. My name was Shy.
Okay.
SHY.
You're telling the whole world this now. They're going to be Googling you.
Okay. Well, I think I buried it deep enough. If someone finds it, please let me know so I can scrub that.
Yeah. It's Shy. So you had a name and everything. Wow. So, all right. So your first time on stage was as Shy. What was it like?
Gosh, man.
I mean, do you have a defining moment where you played music and you were like, this is it, dude. I want to do this. I want to be in a band. Like something.
Yeah.
Or did it? Or it sounds like you kind of just gradually grew into it, but.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's the rapping part was a lot more. I think on a stage you feel a little bit more comfortable. You're not exposing as much, imperfection, if you will. When you sing melodies, you can be flat or not sound as good. So in the rapping. There's this guy, Philip. Philip was kind of our youth pastor, and he was kind of taking us on and trying to push us in. One day he gave me a mic, and he's like, "Hey, I heard you singing. Can you sing on this mic?" And I said, "No way." And so the very first time I sang, I went in the baptistry closet. He's like, "Well, what if you just go in there and nobody looks at you?" And I go in the baptistry closet, and I sing, and I'm like, "Oh, that wasn't so bad. Like, I got that out of the way." And
eventually, wait, like you sang for the service?
I sang. It was like a youth night thing. Yeah,
you sang from the closet, so nobody could see you. That's epic.
So dumb. But I think
how old were you then?
Oh gosh, that was teenage. That was 16,
like late high school.
15, 16, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be tough to sing as a 15. Yeah.
Yeah, I was comfortable with the stage again. Like you can rap and hype people and all that kind of talk and stuff. But that singing part is much more vulnerable of a space to expose.
So you did it. You're people. Like, okay, that's pretty good.
So yeah,
my first singing gig from the closet.
Got it out of the way, and then I was like, that's not so bad. So then I started adding singing into the raps. I would, do not only the verses, but I would add that. Before that, I have girls sing, the refrain or the chorus, if you will, of the song. And so I started adding that more in. It was kind of like more monotone-ish, not very. If only we had auto-tune back then, we could have manipulated our melodies a little bit better, but very, very basic. So, and then that just kind of grew where the musical side actually came in. In California, we had this festival called Spirit West Coast, and every summer there was this racetrack called Laguna Seca, and they would spend a few days there. And all of the guys, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Michael Smith, like DC Talk, all those guys would come out. And I went to one of those by myself, and I camped out on the side of the mountain. And as I was walking up this mountain, this hill, I guess I would say, I was walking by a group of people, and they were all sitting in a circle around a lantern. And one of the guys had a guitar, and they were just singing songs. And I was walking by, and I said, I could do that. I could probably do that. And I mentioned that I didn't play guitar until later, and that was the defining moment for me. Is more than an entertainer or a person performing. I wanted to take music and use that towards helping other people connect with God, because I saw how they were all sitting around this circle, and some of them had their eyes closed, and some they were just. I was like, wow, you can do that. You can actually help people. like whatever that was. And now we know that was worship, but it's like whatever they're doing, somehow God's connecting with them. So from that moment, I left there, and I went shortly after that. I had some money saved up, and I went and got an acoustic guitar, and I started teaching myself chords and took some guitar lessons and started doing that. And then I started leading worship at my church, singing and playing.
What was the guitar? Was it
my very first guitar was, I don't remember what it was. It was like a $400 Yamaha, something like that. So I don't have it anymore. It was actually stolen when I went away to university. So what was your first couple chords? What was your big favorite one? Ironic story is, I actually, when I was a kid, I broke my arm. So all of like the C-shaped ones where you have to like turn your arm were always difficult still to this day. But man, who doesn't love a good G shape? I mean, just sitting right there pretty. And actually, I still remember playing this guy. He had probably, I don't know how expensive it was, but it was very expensive. When I first heard it, I picked it up and started playing some of those G shapes, and I fell in love with the sound of that acoustic guitar. So, I actually have this, when I do teach guitar lessons, I have a pretty quick philosophy because that's what happened with me. My philosophy in guitar teaching is not to teach the guitar first, but to teach them how to fall in love with the guitar. So if you can get them playing fast, that'll actually like get them to want to learn more, and they'll like self kind of motivate themselves to learn more chords, more scales, more positions, all that stuff. So
not like 6 months of scales before they get a song.
Yeah, I think you just teach them the pentatonic, just the simple, 4 3 3 3 3 4 4, whatever that is, and just a good get them 3 or 4 chords going, and then they're hooked. Like, well, what else can I do? Well, you can add this color, you can add this shape. So
I only play 4 chords anymore.
Most people do. Thank God for the capo, right?
Right.
So
that's when I realized, like, I grew up playing all the chords, and then I went to a conference, and I saw a guy, like, winning all these awards. He was only playing 4 chords. The whole time I was like, no, I'm making this too hard.
Yeah.
So I stopped teaching so much of the movable shape. I learned all these movable shapes and all these
shapes
complicated
are great,
things.
Yeah. I have this.
It's all good.
Actually just gave this away to one of our youth a couple of days ago, but this capo theory, if you can, around here we play more maybe than out there, the number system. If you can learn those numbers, and then you can pretty much play any key in any shape. So the E shape or the G shape or the D shape or A, whatever. Learn some of those chords, and then you can move that capo around and just keep on going. So, yeah.
So when did you start writing songs? And I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit, and then talk about maybe one of the favorite songs you've written. What is it? And how?
Oh gosh, man.
I know that's a tough question.
That's tough. Yeah, that's definitely.
I don't know if I could answer that one, because isn't your favorite song the one you just wrote just a minute ago? Like, it's always your best song, and then you write more and you write more.
Yeah.
When did you start putting songs to paper?
Yeah, so when the rap stuff happened, but the first, like I guess you would say CCM or Christian songwriting. I'll back up in front of that a little bit, because I still remember the very first time that I heard like a Christian rock song. I don't know if you would say it's rock, but Stephen Curtis Chapman's The Great Adventure. I had this big sound system in my room from, all the bass and stuff from the hip hop. And someone had told me to listen to that song, and I sat in between these two speakers and I listened to The Great Adventure, and I saw so much happening in my imagination. Wow, there's guitars over here. I don't remember how many guitars were on that track, but I think it was like definitely like 11 or something. It was like, all these things. I'm like, wow, there's so much in here. And the hat is over there. And like, I just really got excited about mixing and stuff. And I wanted to do something like that. So I actually went out and bought like a $300 like PV electric guitar and started messing around with that. But one of the first songs that I wrote was this song called The Real Superman. And it was kind of modeled off of that Great Adventure kind of idea, like just kind of a rock, kind of country, folky type of kind of thing. And the song was basically just saying like we have this Superman, fictitious kind of person, but Jesus was the real Superman. He was the one who walked on water, rose from all the miracles that Jesus did. So that when I started playing that was one that got requested more and more, and FCA and churches that I would go and lead worship for and stuff. They wanted to hear that, and definitely evolved past that over the years. That was one of my first favorite songs, and I don't like it now because it was like a ton of A's, just hit A's over again, A, all that.
Oh, and the vocals, yeah.
The vocals, so just super high, super easy to do when you're 19, but not so much when you're a little bit older. So
Stephen Curtis. All his stuff in my early producing days. I mean, his stuff was the movement was happening all over the place. The progression, it's really, I think, maybe more brilliant than some people really realize when you listen to the movement in his, all of his songs.
Absolutely. I think, his songwriting, there's another song that I wrote over, it was inspired off of Speechless. I don't remember that one.
Oh, yeah.
Like just that E-shape kind of thing, where he moves it around a lot. It was a song called Spirit Led. That was like my first real album that had Spirit Led, Real Superman, Jesus Got My Back, some of those songs that were on there. That was kind of where I was just really experimenting with music. I was in college, learning theory and composition and all that kind of stuff. So that was, having fun with a French horn line versus, strings, like actually like putting some really cool things in a song. It was really a lot of fun. So, but the song that I say out of all of, I have the Christmas music and the Not Ashamed album. I have some of those things, but I think my favorite song that I go to when I sit down at the piano is a song called Rev 4. It was based off of Revelation 4, and it's not so much the song, but it was a moment that made that song stand out for me, because the chorus is just holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. It's what the angels sing all the time, all over and over and over again, and we join in with the song of heaven. And I was doing this, opening up for this very popular band at the time, and it came to this moment, and there was just this large gathering of just, I don't know how many people in the room, but very, 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 like maybe thousands of people in this room. And we got to this song, and we stopped in the chorus, and the song was supposed to be done, but they just kept singing, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty," and you just hear this powerful declaration of "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty," and I'm like, man, that is my favorite thing of all time that I got to be a part of is helping other people connect with the song of heaven, and that was probably like mid-20s. Somewhere around there, maybe late 20s, something like that. And from that moment, that kind of like steered my heart towards congregational worship. Like, wanting to, I was already a worship leader at the time, but like actually kind of like absorbing that reality. Like my big desire is to help other people connect with God in a divine way, if you will. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's powerful moments of decision in your life. Did you know that my channel statistics show that only about half of you watching right now are subscribed to the channel? If you're enjoying these sessions, please take a moment, hit the subscribe button. If you do that, I promise I'll work hard to make this channel bigger and better with every single episode. And just one more thing. There are over 1,000 video tutorials on the new Worship the King platform that cover everything from guitar, drums, bass, vocals, live stream mixing, audio tech, and more. Through the Worship Band Builder and Propel Mentorship Program, we can work together and take your church to the next level in worship and tech. To learn more, go to worshiptheking.com and click apply. Tell me about what age were you and how you met Christ? When did you come to that?
So, when I was 9, we moved back from Germany and started going to this little Baptist church. And I remember this my dad was gone a lot. Pastor Bill, he's still in my life today, encouraging me. But he was the pastor at the time, and he would pick me up and take me out, and while my dad was gone, and spend time with me and share Christ. So I knew about the cross and Jesus had to die because I was a sinner. Got baptized at a young age. When I believe I was just about 9 or 10 when we came back. But like logically, like I knew I was being saved, but I had never surrendered my life to God. I didn't know what that meant. That's kind of so young. Like, what does that even mean? And so, the knowledge has always been there. And then in high school, I went away from God and kind of doing my own thing. Part of that rap story actually had nothing to do with God. It was actually pretty bad stuff that was, I mentioned Naughty by Nature and Sir Mix-a-Lot and some of those guys that were doing all that stuff. Well, I was part of writing some of those songs as well, like in that vein, if you will. But then I was 17 years old, and God basically kind of confronted me and said, if you keep going in this direction, you will die. This is the direction you're going into. And so it was a very strong conviction where I met with him. It would take a long time to talk about that, but I, in a sense, had a Paul on Damascus Road experience where I actually, not to freak anybody out or weird anybody out, but like there was a light, and God kind of came to me and said, it's time for you to get serious about this. And so I was actually at a church, and it was kind of like I was trying to figure out what all this meant. And then I ended up going forward in the typical, I surrender all, just as I am, altar call.
So wait, you're a teenager, you're going down a path of destruction.
Yep.
You're just doing your own thing. Why were you at church?
My parents were very, in fact, my mom actually had prayed the prayer, like either bring him back or take him. Like, I just can't stand to see him in this life anymore. So that involved drugs, that involved, all kinds of things.
Okay. So you were on a path,
but I knew about God. So I was one of the people that most people would be frustrated about a Christian, because I professed Christ, but I completely lived the opposite of everything that Christ would tell us to do with our lives.
So you go to church on Sunday, maybe, but you were living your own thing.
Here and there.
Yeah. And your mom was, and your
for
mom
the show, just to make mom happy, like that.
Yeah.
Show up. But when I went back that time, I actually hadn't been back for years. Like, I was completely out of the space.
So what took you from 9 to 17? Where do you remember a moment where it went wrong, or did you just gradually go into just your own thing?
Yeah, I can't say that it was one singular event. That phrase, you are who you hang around with, is pretty accurate. The people you hang around with, you just sort of one compromise after another compromise, and once you see that, like, well, this compromise wasn't so bad, it didn't really hurt anybody or do anything, or this kind of felt good, it didn't really hurt me, like, eventually you find yourself and you're doing drugs all the time, and you're not very ambitious about life, and you're like, wow, how did I even get here? Like, where?
Yeah, I think for me, I have a similar story, but this isn't about my story, but
yeah.
I know it's the people I was with. Because if I was with different people, I never would have done the path that I went on, that went to completely way out there.
Yeah,
it was pivotal with the people I was with. It was my band. It was my little junior high to high school band.
Okay,
but I know that if I hadn't been with those guys, I wouldn't have ended up right where you were when you were 17.
Right. Yeah.
So you had a moment where you knew, like, I'm gonna die. This is gonna.
Yep, it was very clear. And whether God was going to do that or not, but it was spiritually, I knew he was saying to me that you either got to pick one way or the other. Yeah,
it's real, because I have several friends from that group that are dead, and I just, it happens.
Yeah.
It's like we were doing that then. My path was dramatically changed, similar to yours, but you could have been dead. I would have been dead too.
Yeah, and I think from that moment, and still to this day, there's other things of course, across my life that helped stir my ambition for God. But that was definitely a defining moment that I'm a dead man walking. Like, it's borrowed time because I really should have been taken out much sooner.
So when that, at that church, at that moment, what was it like afterwards? What happened?
Yeah. So funny story. I went forward to give my life to Jesus, and I still can't remember if it was that night or the next night, but the very next night. In Baptist churches, you have Sunday morning, and then you have that Sunday night, you all come back and you do another service. And so I dedicated my life to ministry. And that morning, I believe it was the same day, that morning, gave my life to Jesus. It wasn't enough. That very next night, I got to give my whole life to this. And so that's when I set everything down, all of the stuff that I was doing. It was probably the best yet the worst 3 months of my life, because all of my friends, just because you change doesn't mean your friends are going to change, And so that for me was, some people thought I was abandoning them. I was selling out. California, there was never really a thing of gangs, but some of them thought they were gangs. So they had this mentality like, you can't leave us, all that kind of stuff. So it for those few months, it was literally all God. I read the Bible as much as I could. I'd wake up in the middle of the night praying. I had nightmares because obviously coming off drugs, you're detoxing from all of that stuff. And so just even physically transitioning out of that, I had such a powerful encounter with God. It was cold turkey. It was night and day. It wasn't like I'm going to work through this. It was like, I'm never touching any of that. I stopped cussing. I stopped looking at stuff on TV. Like, everything was just a pure, like, sanctification thing.
And you lost a lot of friends, probably.
I lost all of them. Every single one. I mean, there was one, my best friend, and him and I, we tried, because we loved each other. Still to this day, I pray for him all the time. But yeah, you had to. Life was completely different, but that conviction was so strong. And if anyone's listening to this, just encouragement, like, from my own lesson is if that radical thing happens in your life, just proceed with caution and grace. Like, sometimes we're so, like, animated and so, like, absorbed in what's our own story that other people are not ready for that. You just gotta continue to love people and meet them where they're at, and not try to just jump on them and stuff. And I think I did that with my friends. So.
Well, I mean, our stories are so similar.
Yeah.
I lost all my friends except one, the one that led me to Christ. All my other friends were out.
Yeah. Like, so you know what I'm talking about.
And I know exactly what you're talking about. And I look back now and I think, like, it was a rough time, because you're like,
yeah.
I remember one of my friends was like on the phone trying to convince me that being a Catholic was enough or good enough. And I'm like,
oh, gotcha.
I'm like, you're just smoking weed all the time, and it doesn't matter if you're a Catholic or not, but you're not saved, whatever that means. You're not.
Yeah.
So he was like, that was it. He hung up on me. That was it. We didn't talk after that.
Really?
But we were, I mean, in that moment, we're basically saying, like, I'm done with this. And they were all like, no, you got to keep doing this. You're crazy. And like, I'm this, I go to church once a week. I'm fine. Mm-hmm. I'm like, no, we're not fine. We're all going to die, So I think it's really hard to look back on those, on that era and feel like, oh yeah, I did all the right things. But at some point you are completely turning around.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And everybody else that was like trying to drag you down, it was like, I mean, I finished school with those people, but we just weren't buddies anymore. We just, and that's, and it was weird. It was weird to be, I was 17 as well. And I had those friends from junior high on all the way up until then. So it was like, it was a major change. Like, hey, I'm not going to smoke pot anymore. I'm not going to do all this.
Right.
And they're like, what?
Yeah.
And then it turned into like, you're better than us.
Yeah, exactly. And same thing. Yeah.
So the whole thing was, it was really, it wasn't an easy transition, but I wish there was a better way to go about it. But when you're 17, everything's like, you're crazy. Everybody's crazy. They're coming at you. Yeah. So it sounds like you had even the gang issue and all that stuff. And where did you find allies? Did you have a friend come along? Because I had one friend, and we tried to convert the whole high school. It's ridiculous, but really? We had one friend, and we just tried to convert everybody for the rest of the high school.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. I think I've always been more of a kind of an individual, self-motivator type of kind of guy. I just kind of just went out and found places where I could be useful. So
you're like a loner dude just by himself?
I didn't want to be, but I was okay. The thing is that I was so intense that I couldn't find anybody to match my level of intensity. Like, I mean, maybe there was. And so I would actually go to different youth groups and different churches, and I would connect with people. And to be honest, I was looking for a girlfriend. I wanted to be with somebody and stuff, and can necessarily connect. But I just had this intensity. Like, I mean, I didn't know if I was supposed to be it was confusing. It's still the question of my life. Am I supposed to be a musician or a pastor? And it just happened to be they folded into both as a worship pastor. But I had a very pastoral heart. And so
is this you jumping youth group to youth group? Is this where you met your wife?
No, I didn't meet her until very much. I met my wife Marlena in college and at university, okay. Cal Baptist University. I met her when I was around 24. But yeah, just jumping from different place. Finally at this church called Shoreline, they were kind of the more cutting edge, moderate like church in the Bay Area, and fell in love with them and the worship that was going on there. I got involved in this little small group. It was just a small college study at the time, and it's funny. I'll tell you one story. I love this story. The guy who was leading the group at the time, his name was Charles. Charles is not alive anymore. He passed away from COVID. But so I just love telling this story. He knew that I was into rap. I was doing the rap and all this stuff, and still trying to figure this out. And so he said, "Hey man, we're trying to do this college group. Would you come and bring your drums and set it up, play drums?" And I said, "Okay, sure." So the first night I bring all my drums in, I'm really excited to play. And he comes in, he says, "Hey Shawn, the guys who were supposed to lead worship are not going to make it. Hey, you play guitar and sing a little bit too, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you've kind of practiced these songs. Do you think you could sing them?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll do that." So that night I pulled out my guitar, sitting in front of my drum set, and I led worship that night. And then so that was that. And he's like, "Well, how did that feel?" I was like, "That's okay. I mean, that was all right, you know." And the very next week, same exact thing. Set my drums up, and he said, "Hey, they're not going to make it again. They're stuck in LA. Can you lead again?" Sure, I did it the second night. Then I have a conversation with him after that, and he's like, "So how do you feel about this? Is it something that you wish you would do more often?" I said, "I really like it. It's actually really, really fun." He said, "Okay, well, good, because there actually is nobody else." Like, it was just, I had to convince you that you could do this, and I had to trick you into leading worship. So it's a very funny story that I actually got tricked into leading worship for that college group. That college group grew. He ended up stepping off. Another guy stepped on later on, Tom Green, and then Renault, who is a lifelong friend now, and he became that college pastor. And then that's when I ended up following him to Florida, and we planted Mosaic out there. So it's very interesting how.
So you were playing drums and singing, or were you just?
I was supposed to play drums, and other people were supposed to lead worship, and they didn't. Well, they didn't exist, but maybe they'd exist, but they weren't coming. I don't know what he meant, but they were never supposed to be there. It was just his way of tricking me.
Okay.
To get in there and actually be a part of this group. So he had a coffee shop at the time. It was called Petri Cafe, which I had regularly gone and done, like, tested out some of my very new contemporary songs, but I was still more comfortable with that rapping kind of thing. So
the rap worship leader,
yeah. This was and to say that, man, discovery doesn't have to be overnight for anybody. It took me a very long time to figure out which area I was supposed to be in. I know there's a lot of pressure. Like, man, I got to figure out what I'm supposed to do now. Like, just be faithful to what's right in front of you and do that well, and be okay with connecting with God and figuring out how you can do what you're doing right now. And I think a lot of times we're like, man, I'm not where I want to be, or I'm not doing what I want to do. Just be faithful to what you're doing right now, and God will develop your story. Because I think it's what Ephesians 3:20 says. It's, that he's able to do more than we can ask or imagine. And so
right,
we can do all we can, but he's going to take that story to the next level for sure.
So it says, I was reading your bio, and around 2004, you found out you had a brain tumor.
Yeah.
And I want to just talk about a little bit about that, and how it played out, and how it changed you, and how it shaped the path that you're on right now, before we get into the church that you're at right now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I had just moved to Florida, so kind of like that whole backstory of being in college ministry. When I was at Shoreline, Renault moved to Florida. I went to college at CBU. That's where I met Marlena. But during that time, him and I just felt more and more and more like we were supposed to do this together. I ended up moving from California to Florida. And I still remember going over the Grapevine when I was in college. It was sometime in the summer. And as I was driving over that mountain, I actually lost sight. I couldn't see for about 15 minutes, and just excruciating pain. I was like, that was kind of my first indication that something was wrong. But obviously I felt better. My sight came back, and then I didn't really do much about that. And then by the time I'm actually in Florida, living there, moved there, established there, these things started getting worse. The eye thing, the headaches. We actually did all that we thought we needed to do with CAT scans and different kind of things. They couldn't figure it out. They thought, man, this guy maybe he just has severe headaches and things like that. Finally, we pressed in and we did an MRI and found out there was a tumor in there, and it was the size of about a fist. And I don't know how you missed that on a CAT scan, but somehow
a size of a fist.
Yeah. So
in your head.
Yep.
And they just couldn't see it.
I guess they couldn't. They saw it on the MRI. That's for sure, from every angle. And so, we had to get that taken out. So
how old were you?
I do know I bought my house when I was 24, so I would have been 25. Yeah.
And they said, we found a giant fist in your head, and we got
to get it out. So the surgeons at the time were talking about, you got to cut half of your head off. You can have a scar. Ended up finding this guy. I believe his name was Michael Smith was his name. And, or Rich, Michael Rich was his name. He was kind of doing this at the time. It was called stealth technology, and they ended up cutting a line, and then I still have like a plate on my head that's about the size of a silver dollar or so, where they went in, they took everything out and got out. Crazy story about this is to be an encouragement to anyone, is that sometimes you still have to go through things, but God can still give you a miracle. And so I mentioned how I lost sight. When they originally saw the MRI, the tumor was pressing in on my optical nerve, which is on one side of the bone right here. And so the surgeons were like, we need to get you in right away. Like, if you don't do this, you could lose your sight. So I went away. We prayed. We prayed that weekend. We prayed for a miracle. And then I went back and saw another surgeon the next Monday. And interesting, the story was that tumor was on the other side of this bone. And like, all that to say is that sometimes we still have to walk out some of our suffering, some of our challenges in life, but God can still do some miracles. So I still had to go through that season. I still had to have that tumor removed. And this was another life-changing moment in my life when they rolled me into the ER. I had a Bible on my chest, and this tumor that I had confronted me with the reality of, like, this may be it. Like, you may go in and you may never come back. This may be the end of your story.
Yeah. Did the doc say, like, hey, we're going to go and try to get it, but we might not, because that's pretty serious surgery.
Yeah, anytime you deal with the brain, there's always a possibility of, and it was right on the away from what I understand it, the communication center is more in that area. So it could have been, messed up your speech or I mean, anytime you go under anesthesia or any of those things, there's always possibility of complications. So you're dealing with this. So from the time I knew to the time we got that was about 2 or 3 weeks. Those 2 or 3 weeks, I was preaching the gospel to the Blockbuster person, the grocery store clerk, everyone. I go, do you know Jesus? Do you know about him? Because I'm like, such intensity of an evangelism, like, and an urgency to make sure that I did everything I could to get that message out. And even, like I said, rolling in to the ER, I'm asking everyone, hey, have you guys all heard about Jesus? Do you know what he did for you? And this evangelist side of me that I never knew I had came out. And that just after that, it just stayed with me. It was a wake-up call. And I think we get into the rhythms of life, and it's just like an everyday thing. We forget about that urgency, that we're surrounded by a bunch of people who don't know this wonderful truth about Jesus. And so I'm so thankful that a tragedy happened to me to wake me up to the reality that there's more to life. It's this gospel message. And when we read the Word of God, people lived with that urgency, and we need to live with that urgency still today. So that was a big, big, big change for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got through surgery and
everything
came out preaching.
Yeah. Funny story, talked about, drugs and addiction. I had my surgery at the beginning of December. There was Passion Conference. So go to that New Year's Eve Passion Conference. I go to that. Louis Giglio was kind of making a joke kind of thing, like, hey, turn to the people around you and tell them your deepest, darkest secret, thing that you're struggling with. And I turned around and said, hey, my name is Shawn. I'm the worship pastor, and I'm addicted to drugs. And the person looked at me like, what? And I said, yeah, because I was on Percocet very heavily about that time, like dealing with all this stuff. And I said, it's so fun. That's my pastor. He knows I'm recovering from a brain tumor. Like, I'm going to be all right. He's like, oh, gosh, thank you. Okay, glad. All right. So
was the pain medicine? I've never been on that crazy stuff. Did it take a while did it mess you up? Like you
definitely become dependent on it. But I mean, the reality is when it's done, it's done. But what you do in those situations, you keep telling your doctor, I'm still not all right. Even though you're all right, you still say, I need some more. So those doctors definitely carry you on a lot longer than you need to be carried along. So
yeah, because it's probably hard to get off that stuff. You gotta get. I don't know. Thank God I've never been on it, because I have an addictive personality already. So
you know to be careful with that stuff,
right? Yeah. So you were married at that time, right? You were
at the brain tumor?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, this was before your.
Yeah, I know married. It's hard to put a timeline with all these different stories and stuff, but I can just.
So you're 24, 25. You recover. Yeah. Then in college you met your wife.
Well, I met her in college, but she was dating somebody else.
Okay.
And she had dated, like, when I was in college. Like, we joke about this all the time. Like, we just kind of had this not romantic attraction, but a attraction. I was one of the older guys, so I think she just admired my maturity, and but she was with other guys at the time. I kind of just knew in my heart if there was anybody. I actually called her dangerous, because like if there was anybody that could actually steal my heart, that would be her. So she was dangerous, and I needed to be careful around her. But I ended up leaving college. She still stayed. We stayed kind of connected through MySpace back then. And she dated a guy, and he wasn't very comfortable with our friendship. And I mean, I think he was rightfully so in thinking that, because obviously there was something. So we stopped communicating. And then after she ended up, I had gotten through the brain tumor, like the whole college, Cal Baptist stayed engaged. They prayed for me through all that. When we got through that season, she reached back out. She had broken up with him, and it was like this is my shot. I went for it. So
you better do this now before she gets another boyfriend. Got too many boyfriends.
And she had decided that she had been through so much that she was not going to date anybody. And I said, okay, I'll help you work through that.
Were you dangerously in the friend zone there for a minute?
I was. Yep. But
there's hope for you. If you're in the friend zone, you can get out of the friend zone.
You can just slide.
You just got to
slide in there, man. But and she was doing some counseling and going through a book, and so I bought the book. So I'll go through the book with you, and I'll help you through that. And we talked probably about a month. It was Thanksgiving. I actually showed up at her door on Christmas Day, whatever year that was. We had our first date that Christmas night, and within a few days we fell in love. I was there for a week, and then I ended up going back. We flew back and forth for about 6 months, hanging out, and then she moved to Florida that summer, and then we dated for a year, and we were engaged for 3 months. Like, we just knew, no time to drag this out. Let's just
get out of the friend zone and get married. Hey, thanks for listening to part 1 of this interview with Shawn Starbuck. Part 2 will be all about ministry, technique, and how he's built a successful team around him in his local church. Check the link in the description and don't miss part 2.